Thank you for tuning in for this live stream webinar on unemployment for artists and creatives. My name is Brian McQuiggan, and I'm the program director at Artist Trust, a nonprofit organization serving individual artists of all disciplines in Washington State. I'm also a writer, and in a previous life, I was a freelancer and gig worker. Today, we're talking with the Unemployment Law Project about applying for unemployment as gig workers, independent contractors, freelancers, or self-employed in light of the CARES Act, which expands unemployment benefits to people who do not have quote unquote traditional employment. The information provided today is based on what we know right now, and we anticipate more information will become available as Washington's Employment Securities Department prepares to accept claims from gig workers sometime this next week. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our partners, Washington Filmworks and Whipsmart. Washington Filmworks is a nonprofit that creates economic development opportunities for Washington State's film industry. And Whipsmart is a new creative economy focused nonprofit that gives creative professionals in Washington State the business tools they need to succeed. Today, I'm here with attorneys Ann Paxton and John Tirpak from the Unemployment Law Project, which provides low-cost representation and free advice and counsel to people in Washington State who have been denied unemployment benefits. Thank you both for being part of the program. I have a few questions for Ann and John, and then we'll take questions from you at home, which you can type into the chat box on YouTube. Feel free to add those questions at any time. And if you aren't able to stay with us the whole time, this webinar is being recorded and will be archived on our website. So Ann and John, to start, can you give us an overview of how to apply for unemployment, how the process works, proof of documentation, and any other information people should know?
John has typically been starting and I've been weighing in. John, do you want to start?
Go ahead. Why don't you go first then?
Okay, I think we're mostly here to talk about access to unemployment benefits for gig workers and people who are independent contractors. So I'm not going to kind of go over the changes that have been made in the state under the emergency rules, except ones related to that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So in Washington State, many times people who are doing contracting work are not actually, they're actually misclassified as independent contractors, and they should be classified as employees for purposes of unemployment benefits. So sometimes they're denied benefits and we help them with an appeal. And then we often have a good chance of getting benefits for them because they have been misclassified. Their employers are not meeting the criteria for an having an independent contractor. So that's one way that you can get benefits in Washington State. That's the same is not true in every state. But now under the new federal law, the CARES Act, there is a set of provisions called the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance. And that program is about to kick in. We're not sure when it will actually be implemented permanently, but right now we expect, we've just received about 4 days later, 4 days from earlier, we received rules from the Department of Labor on how they plan to implement the rules. So what it says now is, and by the way, the PUA is in addition to the regular benefit program that the state runs. So it will be added on to, it will be administered by the state, but it will be benefit eligibilities that are added on to current state programs. The federal rule says an individual works as an independent contractor with reportable income. These are people who are eligible, and is unemployed, partially employed, or unable or unavailable to work because the COVID-19 public health emergency has severely limited his or her ability to continue performing customary work activities, and is thereby forced the individual to suspend such activities. For example, a driver for a ride-sharing service may qualify for PUA benefits if he or she has been forced to suspend operations as a direct result of the COVID-19 public health emergency. Then it also says that the benefits, many of the qualifying circumstances for PUA benefits are likely to be of short-term duration. For example, if you qualify because your child's school has closed and you need to care for the child, that will not be extended beyond the date that the normal school year was scheduled to end. So it's short duration. The benefits are supposed to be able to be backdated as far as February 21st, February 2nd. If the individual meets the PUA's eligibility requirements. And one note that this has all come out in the last few days. One note that should be taken into account is that when processing PUA claims, states are required to verify that individuals are not entitled to regular unemployment insurance benefits. If their eligibility for regular unemployment is questionable, for example, if there are wages in their base period, that's basically the year before they file, but no claim is filed, or a job separation has not been adjudicated, then the states must first require the individual to file a regular employment insurance initial claim. And then if the individual is subsequently disqualified from regular benefits, then the state may consider the individual for PUA eligibility. And I mention this because it's indicating that there are going to be more delays in implementation of this program than we hoped for initially. So John, maybe you can give your take on what's been happening.
Well, what you lay out here kind of presents the fact that it will be complicated for some people, and the word we're getting is that after April 18th, they should have something set up. So let's see. If you haven't applied yet, some people say that you should wait until after April 18th. Others say apply now, you might be denied, but then it'll be retroactive. In any event, they're saying that benefits will be retroactive to when your claim would have started anyway, so it may not really make a difference. One question that's come up a lot is, how much money will I get per week? And for regular unemployment benefits, over the years, I've gotten a sense of, well, you know, somebody who makes this thousands a year probably get 500, or somebody gets 600 or 700. It kind of caps out about 750 or you know, in that range. Even if you make over 100,000, it's still 750 a week. So what the question comes up is, well, how are they going to calculate it? If I drove a little bit for Uber, but then I did, maybe I'm a painter and I sold a few paintings, and I'm also a performance artist, and maybe I did a few events. How does that put together? And I think what's unclear to me is how they're going to come up with the base amount for that. But the good news is that they've added $680 a week to everyone's unemployment benefits. Now, this is pretty amazing when consider up until a couple of weeks ago, the maximum was about 750. So the reason this is wonderful news for me is that even if, let's say, you were very part-time employed, or just did very little Uber driving, or very, you know, and maybe whatever formula they come up with, you only would get $200 in unemployment, which isn't, you know, it's about $800 a month, which isn't bad, of course, but it's something. It's something, but it's not enough to live on. With that extra 600, you know, that 200 becomes 800, and 800 times 4, most people can cover rent with that, at least. So there is good news coming on that.
So it sounds like there are a lot of unknowns right now, but as far as planning ahead, you know, for when folks are able to apply, what should they have together for it if they have a lot of different income streams that are 1099 based? You know, what materials should they pull together so they can be prepared?
Good question. We've been getting this question a lot, and my answer is based on what I think is just sort of common sense. Look at what your tax filing was last year, all those receipts you have, or 1099 forms, or whatever it was. You know, have that together and think about what you've earned in, you know, from January 1st until March, when you probably were unable to earn anymore. That would be good to get those things together and be ready. And any other suggestions?
Yes. One thing, this would be more general, but not in terms of things that you need to bring to your bring to the table when you're applying for a claim. One piece of advice that we're getting actually directly from the Employment Security Department is this: if you have any connection with an employer, do your best to maintain that connection. Stay attached to the employer as much as you can, because as soon as you voluntarily break the relationship, you will have more difficulty obtaining benefits. This is the word from the ESD. So it's harder to get benefits if you quit than if you are laid off or fired. And the other reason, of course, if you have access to benefits that way, it's also a way of retaining that connection. So in general, that's just general advice. If you can, no matter what employer you're talking about, hold on as long as you can. And I don't know if you want to add anything now, John.
Well, because there are some employers who will be happy to have you come back when things improve. Others may end up firing you for not coming in, but put your health and safety first. And one thing I just want to add now, because I don't want to forget, our office, the Unemployment Law Project, focuses on unemployment. That's been our focus for many, many years. So there's other types of assistance available now through the Small Business Administration and things like that. So what I don't know, and I know that people can find this out, is there are some people who are self-employed and just go from job to job and see themselves as just a single individual working, but others form businesses, whether it's like LLC or other kind of incorporation. Again, in business law, it's not my area, but I know that's out there, and generally those folks are not available or not eligible for unemployment under most circumstances. But I've had the question in the last few weeks, like, should I go for the small business loans that they say are going to forgive, or should I go for the unemployment, or both? Am I going to get in trouble if I do both? I really don't have a firm answer on that. I think it might be a case-by-case situation if you look at what the advantage is for each of the programs, because I believe the small business loans are forgivable for wages and salaries. So if you were not being paid as a salary person within your business, then and are not going to use it for that, then probably unemployment would be a better option. And any thoughts on that with the small business loans?
Well, my understanding of the forgivable loan program is independent contractors or self-employed individuals in need of financial help may be eligible. Bring your 1099s to a bank and apply for the forgivable loan sponsored by the Small Business Administration in order to find out. But that is what they have told us.
Oh, also, is there a state program as well for small business?
There is. Governor Inslee just announced this week there is a working Washington small business grant administered by the State Department of Commerce, and it has up to $10,000 for small businesses under 10 employees. Businesses can use this money to pay for rent, utility bills, supplies, inventory, and other operating expenses. And if you want information about the application, it is at coronavirus.wa.gov, coronavirus.wa.gov.
So for folks who are not traditionally employed, they're looking at income streams that are coming in a variety of ways, and a lot of those aren't predictable necessarily. So when they're projecting what would be their claim, they're kind of making a best guess that doesn't have the same kind of consistency that a traditional employee would have. So how do they go about knowing that this hasn't quite opened up yet? What would be your advice to them as far as going about applying?
Your monetary eligibility is based on your base year, which is roughly the last year before
Okay.
your claim, so not projections. So the best, you do need those records to show. And also under the pandemic rules that are supposed to be adopted, you will not have to have the former requirement met, which was 680 hours. So a lot of artists probably might not meet that, but they would still be eligible. And we haven't got the final last word on how that's going to be implemented. But our understanding is that would apply if you are a recent employee who was laid off, don't have the hours, or for whatever other reason, maybe you're working part-time, but somehow, for some reason, you don't have 680 hours. They have told us that you will qualify under the pandemic unemployment assistance.
And then for folks that applied already who were gig workers or contractors, do they then have to refile with this new program, or is their original file, their original claim going to be pushed through to that?
John, do you want to answer that, the issue about reapplying?
Okay, very good question. We've been told different things at different meetings with officials from the state who I believe are trying to do their best to get this thing resolved. The one version I've heard is that people should just apply now. If you're rejected, try to keep claiming if you can do the weekly claim, and then when they can sort this out, they will go back retroactive. But I've also heard that people should wait until after April 18th, when the system is more ready to process the information. Because I mean, the unemployment system as it is now, typically, you go in, you give your name, social security number, they ask you what where you worked in the last year, or year and a half, kind of going back, and they can look up your social security number, see the income, and then they move on to why the job ended, And right now, the big problem is people go in there, well, there's other technical problems with social security numbers and things like that, but generally it's like somebody goes in and then it's like, what are your hours? And it comes back 0, 0, 0 over 4 quarters. And it's not set up for you to then say, "Whoa, but wait, I worked, 800 hours for Uber and Lyft in the last year." Like, there's no way to put that in at this point. And so people are just being rejected. And what I've told is people say there's a message that comes up with the phone number, and then when you try to call the phone number, you can't get through to anyone. So that's been a problem now. But one advice I've heard is that always keep a record of when you first became unemployed, or when you first, and then when you first try to apply, because if it takes a while to get this thing sorted out, I think you'll be questioned as to if the records they have are not good. You'll say, well, when did you become unemployed? When did you first apply? And you want to be able to, say that with some confidence, because, it's so much better to say, I try to open up the unemployment claim on March 12th than sometime in March, because that could be in a 30-day swing.
And then for folks who, so for folks who are independent contractors, what would be your advice to them right now? Should they just go and file the claim? Should they wait?
Personally, I would file now, and then if that doesn't work, file again after April 18th.
Okay.
But if you can feel like you can wait and maybe use the time to get your records together, it's sort of a, honestly, it's a personal preference. I talked to someone the other day, and I was explaining this, and he said, I have some money in the bank, so I'm going to wait. So it was like, okay, maybe that works for him. Maybe he feels better. I'll get in line a little bit later because other people are more needy. Other people, I would say anything they do, I think sometimes it relieves some of the emotional stress of this,
Mm-hmm.
to to sort of get the application in, even if it's being rejected. If you can file an appeal, file an appeal. If you want to call your state senator or state representative and tell them about it, that might feel good too, because they need to know, and our governor's office need to know that the system isn't working, and they need to hire even more people, more than they claim they will be hired. So maybe taking action for a lot of people is a good emotional release. And also too, it's like I can be a procrastinator sometimes, and I know that sometimes if you don't do things in the moment, then it gets pushed aside and you get busy with other things. So but whether you file now or not, it's good to get your records together, and also just document, like when did, and I keep using the example of the Uber driver. If you're an Uber driver, when did your hours go down to zero? Like, was that first week of March, second week of March, third week of March? Kind of document that when your income stopped.
So
Right.
then,
The issue is always going to be documenting. So if you do file a claim, that gives you at least an automatic record that you filed then. If you want to qualify for retroactive benefits, you are going to be able to have need as much documentation as you can put together.
But they promise us that if you file later, they will go back, including the $600 weekly bonus. So that's what they're promising consistently. And if that promise doesn't come true, in late April or May, I would request a hearing. And when you get your hearing date, call Unemployment Law Project for help.
and then for artists and makers who sell work through galleries or markets, or musicians and performers whose income is a mix of like shows and sales and merch, they're usually sole proprietorships or LLCs. Are they eligible to file for unemployment, or are they going to be looking at the small business loans instead?
So under the pandemic unemployment assistance, they should be eligible.
Okay.
And they can also apply for the SBA loan.
Oh, so they can do both.
Well, I don't think they can get both, but they could try to apply for both.
Okay. And then for artists who have a mix of income that's both traditional employment and then gig work and contractors, they may have already filed for the W-2 based employment, but then now with the expanded benefits, they'll be able to file for the gig work too. How should they approach it? Should they be opening a new claim, or are they able to revise the claim they already submitted?
That's a good question. We don't have the details yet on whether they're going to give you a proportionate amount of benefits, regular benefits, based on how much money you brought in from your independent contracting, or whether everyone is going to qualify at the same level. We don't know yet.
Okay. And then what about artists who are underemployed? Maybe they have a little bit of income coming in from online sales or like small remote contracts, but not enough to survive. Are they eligible to apply?
Anyone can apply, but we don't know what level you have to have in order to be eligible. Our understanding is if you are unemployed, you should apply.
Gotcha. So I just have a couple of more questions, and then I'm gonna go to the YouTube chat and start pulling from there. Let me just look at my list here. Oh, I think we covered everything that I had. Is there any advice that you would have for folks, just generally speaking, about how to approach this, knowing that there are so many unknowns?
I think I can just repeat basically what I said, or in summary.
Yeah.
Collect as much documentation as you can, and that includes applying for benefits. They told us last week, the Employment Security Department said specifically, if you are an independent contractor, go ahead and apply. Now, I think they have been overwhelmed, and they're starting to tell people not to apply until they get more definite information from PUA. But I would go with what I heard last week. So documentation is very important. This is retroactive, and that could be a question of quite a lot of difference in terms of your benefit amount.
Okay.
Secondly, this issue of staying attached to any employer you have is very important. Don't voluntarily quit if there's any alternative, because your employer cannot quit for you. The employer either has to fire or lay you off. So that's something to keep in mind. Don't feel, guilt tripped into quitting if it's not, if there's an alternative, and there is. And then finally, the Small Business Administration loan is a possibility for self-employed individuals. And I urge people to go to their local bank and get that application. They are voting on new money for that because $350 billion is almost run out, but I think it will be funded.
I'm back now. I'm sorry, my internet dropped.
It's okay.
He was just asking for some last advice that we had to offer, and I gave mine. So whatever you have.
Well, I have a bunch of questions from the YouTube chat, so maybe I can jump into those.
All right.
They're pretty specific to folks like individual situations. So let's see. This one is, my most recent tax return completed is 2018, but I have a 2019 W-2 and 1099s. Should I file for unemployment based on 2018 or 2019?
So your base year is the last four. John, you're better at this formula.
There's base year and alternate base year. Typical base year is you go back a quarter from the quarter you're in to the previous 4 quarters. And then sometimes people don't get in the game there, but they might look at alternate base year, which is, well, let's say you're in the middle of a quarter and you worked a ton of hours. Those hours haven't been reported to the state because the employers report the hours at the end of the quarter. So people can submit proof at that point. So looking back, like from a claim opening in, let's say, April of this year, it would be primarily last year, 2019 income.
Okay. And then this says, I applied for the Work in Washington Small Business Grant. I received an email suggesting that I revised my request. The FAQs requested, this is Work in Washington. This isn't you guys though, right? All right, let's try this one. If I was already on unemployment when this happened, but my current benefits are supposed to expire this week, do I need to reapply for pandemic benefits?
Oh, excellent question. I would keep claiming, and then if it's cut off again, reapply, because they approved an extension of 13 additional weeks, and also the additional 600 a week. So that person should be covered because their claim would be coming to an end after the new extension was passed.
That's right.
And then this question is, will we be able to apply for back dates if we wait until the April 18th date?
That's what I've been told over and over.
Great. And then is the 680 hours required 680 hours of actual W-2 wages or 680 hours of gigging or gig work?
Well, this is why things are a little complicated now. See, normally it would be 680 hours of regular employment, the kind of job you have, that hours you get a paycheck or pay stub somehow with the taxes taken out, all that. So, but now since they're expanding it with the new rules that the federal rules allow, they should be looking at everything. And what we're not sure at this moment is how they're going to do that or calculate it. Our advice is just to get as much documentation as you can in terms of income and hours in the last year and a half that you worked.
And then from what you know from talking to officials, do you have a sense of how the portal is going to work? Is it going to be the normal unemployment portal, or will there be a separate one for self-employed?
My understanding, and Ann can jump in on this, is that it'll be the same thing. It'll be revised. Like now they've suspended the rule that you have to be searching for work, which is a general unemployment rule. So I've been told that question is no longer there, so because it puts people in a awkward dilemma. Because normally if you say you're not looking for work, you're automatically denied unemployment for that week. I believe it will be revised with new categories, but I think it'll be the same portal. And have you heard anything about that?
I think it'll be the same portal.
Great. And then let's see. And then this person wants to know, how do you document loss of work as an independent contractor? It sounds like you're just going off of whatever your last year's or your last several quarters.
Yeah, loss of future work is not the issue. It's what you did in the last year.
Gotcha. And then this person wants to know, if the bulk of my income is from 1099 independent contract work, but I also work 4 to 8 hours a week teaching art classes as an employee with the W-2, how would this affect my application?
This is new territory because, again, normally that would not even count. But my suspicion will be is that they will ask you, what your source of income. And since this is a very common thing for people to have more than one source of income, I would assume they'd ask, like, how much from what I'll call regular employment, the kind of employment where taxes are taken out, all that, and then how much from other sources.
And then this person wants to know, I'm wondering how it will affect our application if almost half of our work was with an out-of-state business. Should we also apply in that other state?
Good question. And again, I seem to pattern. I give you like old rule and new rule. But this is where we're at. So, a lot of people work in more than one state, especially if you're like on the border. Portland, Vancouver, Spokane, Idaho. And since Washington State has higher unemployment rates than our bordering states, everyone prefers to claim here. So they do what's called a combined wage claim. So again, I'm talking last year, normal circumstances. Let's say you worked, 500 hours in Washington State and 300 or 900, 300, 400 hours in Oregon. They can do a combined wage claim where they get you over the 680 hours. And there's some interstate calculation that they do, some magic, but you would be able to get unemployment in Washington based on that. Now, if we're talking about multi-state independent work, I'm assuming the same principles will apply, that they shouldn't just shut you out. And a lot of this goes down to kind of old legal principles about interstate interstate recognition. Do you ever wonder that when you drive into Oregon, you don't have to get an Oregon license because Oregon recognizes Washington State driver's license? Or if you get married in North Dakota and you move here, you are married under Washington law as well, even. And so unemployment is kind of like that, where the system has a national element to it, and the idea behind it is to not penalize or kick people out just because they happen to work in more than one state.
So we at Artist Trust, we give grants to artists, and we're also doing a relief fund right now. And there are many other relief funds out there for artists. So can you explain how receiving a grant or some sort of funding would have an impact on artists' unemployment?
Excellent question. I've been communicating with a few musicians who work for well, orchestras in town, and I heard that there, some grants or some help. My understanding is that, and I can say with confidence that when you get unemployment in a week, when you're claiming unemployment week, they ask you if you worked in that week, not whether you were paid money somebody owed you from last year. So, and I know this is confusing because for food assistance and other benefit programs, there's different reporting requirements, but so, and it's only earned income in that week. So if you get a gift from your grandmother, that's not earned. Although you could say by being a good grandson, maybe you earned it, but you can say that, but it's a gift, so it's not earned income. So you don't report it, you don't worry about it. If you worked for a former employer and they want to give you a gift, again, it's not earned in that week. So I think if some people are worried about this, they can try to contact Employment Security or to report it, and it would reduce their benefit amount. But if it's not earned in that week, it should not be reported and will not count against your benefits, especially, well, actually, the one concern I would have, and I'll say this as a footnote, is what if your former employer, and I say former, it may not be permanently former, but for now former, decides to give you a gift because they know you're on hard times, but they pay you through the payroll system and it's your social security number and all that's attached. That creates a problem because the computers in Olympia are going to eventually talk to each other, and it's going to show up that, Mr. Hernandez received, he got a full unemployment check in a certain week of March of this year, and it shows up that he was paid by an employer or that thing. Now, if that would happen, I would urge them to request a hearing, call the Unemployment Law Project, and it probably will be resolved in your favor. Get a hearing, but that's a problem. And I know this because I had a very memorable case a few years ago of a man who worked for an apple orchard, and the season was over in October, and sometime in November, the employer realized that his hours were miscalculated. They were going through the books and they realized there were some unpaid hours. So the good-hearted employer sent him a check. He did not report it because it wasn't earned in that week, but then it showed up with the unemployment office, but it was resolved.
So I have a few more questions here. I'm a single member LLC that contracts with organizations for filmmaking and training. I don't track all my hours since my work is so project-based. When I apply, what documentation can I use?
Well, I think the income and I think again, this is totally new. It's never been done in the history of the unemployment program since 1935. So I'm guessing they might ask you to estimate your hours and then with the income kind of come up with some kind of calculation.
In addition to our income as a sole proprietor, we also receive income from a note on a property in California, not job related, but definitely income. Is that the type of income counted with a UE claim?
No, not something like that, but it would be different if somehow you were running sort of a property business somehow and maintaining your own properties, and it was more that kind of business. I think that would probably be viewed more as earned income, as opposed to like if you owned some stock and you sold some stock, or if you happen to, I don't know, have a share in a business that had a profit or something and you got that. It's income for tax purposes. I'm sure the IRS wants to know about that so they can tax you on it, but it's not earned income by work. And they use a funny word. Well, I always thought it was a funny word, remuneration. that it has to be service provided for compensation. There has to be that exchange, that you do something. And because over the years, I've had a lot of questions like, well, what if I sell my old guitar on eBay? Is that earned income? I would say no, because it's just a piece of property you're selling. It's your property, you can do that, but it would be different if you were running a used musical instrument store and working at it 40 hours a week, and then it gets more like a business.
What about if you run an Airbnb out of your house as one of your...
Oh, you know what? I've been waiting for that. It's funny, since in the last few years, since Airbnb has become very popular, I've been waiting for this as an unemployment case of somebody getting in trouble or something, and I have not seen it come up. So again, I think I would apply the same principle, because what's happening now with Airbnb is that some people are going into business under this facade of I'm renting out my own. I mean, some people are buying up houses and apartment buildings and running Airbnbs, and it's really a business. And just like the whole gig economy, it creates a lot of problems. When you stay at a hotel, they have insurance. Very often the staff is unionized. There's better health inspection and all types of good things that we come to expect from a good hotel. But in Airbnb, I don't know what they do or how they run it. So and that if you're and I've heard this happening in some of those cities like New York and San Francisco, where people are basically running hotels, and it's really a job. And I think that there's a lot of problems with that.
So we have a whole host of questions about applying with a W-2 and a 1099, which, from what I understand, you really don't know how that's going to work just yet.
No, but again, if they're considering both, they should come back. Just like the same principle that if you worked in more than one state, they should combine it.
Okay. And then, if we have filed and our claim says ineligible and invalid and it's in adjudication, is it likely, if we have uploaded all documentation come April 18th, that we will start getting payment?
What I'm hearing is what they're saying is yes. It's like they're holding, and I think that's why they're not processing these claims the way they normally would, which would be to send you a letter saying you don't qualify, you can request a hearing, whatever. I think they're thinking, well, we don't want to send people those kind of denial letters and create all these hearing and reviews. Let's just process it when we can, if people can be patient.
And then, I'm self-employed with no other income. With the current system, should I select myself as an employer that I work for, or choose that I have no Washington employer?
Oh,
Good question.
and Annie, why don't you go first on this one?
Well, I would say your guess is as good as mine. I wouldn't know how to answer this, because as John says, this is unprecedented.
It's new. Well, but one thing that is an ongoing principle with unemployment, it's better to report than not to report. Meaning you put stuff out there, you give them correct information, and you're going to get it or not. But you can't go wrong with reporting. Like, well, I'll say that there's some obscure rules about pension income and whether that counts against it. And it's very archaic and very, as people say, well, I have this kind of pension, and it's like, I said, well, you know what, report that you have it, and they will look at it, and if it counts against, then you will have your benefit reduced that week or whatever. But if it doesn't, it doesn't, and you've reported it, so you're in the clear. And I've seen the unemployment office, with all the hundreds of people who work there, give inconsistent determinations about things. which may go in a person's favor. But again, reporting is always a good idea.
Yeah, and they have told us that they're upgrading the software. So I suspect that's one thing they're going to be addressing, is what kinds of questions come up on the claim form, and not putting people in a position of having to make a very difficult choice between options that don't really work.
And with the system freezing up now, where people can't even get through their claim or even set up their account and all that, when you do have an account set up and regular unemployment claim, and they ask you questions every week about claiming and verifying that you're still unemployed, there is a messaging thing where you can send a message to a worker with a question or something like that. And this has become important because with people who have fluctuating incomes, part-time workers, on-call workers, that they may have an unemployment claim open. And one week they get this temp job and they work a day, that's fine, and they report the income, and then their unemployment is slightly reduced the next week because of that income. Fine. Well, it won't surprise you to say that some people, when they work that week, their income doesn't match what they thought they were going to earn. Sometimes it's a lot more, sometimes it's less. But you can then go in and message them to say, oh, I thought I was going to make, $20 an hour, but they actually paid me 25. So I want to adjust that. That's fine. You can't get in trouble for that. Or people who over-report, they think they're going to make, $100 or let's say $200 for that day job, and it turns out they only got 150. So they should get more from the unemployment, to correct it that way. But that messaging, like right now, people are just kind of frozen. And then when they try to call the 800 number, they can't get anyone. And when during normal periods of unemployment, the 800 number can be very busy. It often is, but at least if you try back a few times, you can get in, or if you're willing to wait a while, you can get in eventually. But right now, I've been hearing nothing but how impossible it is.
So a lot of gig workers and freelancers, they're not assigning an hour to things. They're being paid based on the project or deliverable. So should they just estimate the number of hours when they're applying? Like, what is your recommendation for that?
Well, I would estimate, if I were in that position now, I'd be thinking about estimating what it means. And I've talked to a lot of Uber drivers about this. Uber only pays you, and Instacart only pays you when you're doing the actual work. It doesn't pay you for waiting for the next job. If you worked for a taxi company and you had the 4 to midnight shift, you would be paid at least minimum wage for those things, and then get your tips on top of that. Even if it's a slow night and you're just sitting in front of a hotel for an hour. But with Uber, you're only paid when you're engaged with the customer. And I think the waiting time issue will be, well, I imagine we will be doing hearings about that waiting time issue, because with a job like that, think about it. Well, every cab driver I ever talked to, some nights are crazy busy and some nights are dead slow.
So then in this case, for artists and freelancers and creatives, they should really just be guessing, best guesstimate number of
estimate. Yeah. Because see, I don't want to get too nerdy here with unemployment stuff, but Washington uses the hour formula. I've been told that we're one of the only states that do that. Other states look at an income, and I'm talking about pre-COVID, unemployment claims. So what's really weird about this in Washington state with the hours is that, let's say you're a highly paid consultant and you get these crazy, hourly rates, and you only work like 500 hours a year, but you make like more money than we'll ever imagine, right? technically you don't qualify for unemployment in Washington State because you only worked 500 hours, but maybe you made $1 million, like, which is, more than most people would make in a year. In other states, they would say, oh, well, you made $1 million, like this person should get an unemployment claim, and they'd have their way of calculating what a maximum amount would be. But here they're hung up on that hour scheme to kind of get people into the gate. And sometimes it works well, but often it doesn't.
So we're about out of time, and I just want to ask one more question that we have here. So if you get the unemployment payment as a 1099 and W-2 worker, will it be for 39 weeks based on what you know now?
My understanding is yes, and anything to the contrary?
But just that you do have to qualify for each week that you're claiming.
Yeah.
You have to
And
be
so
fit
most
to
people,
work.
and there's this right-wing myth out there that everybody just wants to sit on their butt and collect unemployment. Everybody I talk to loves the work they do. They want to get back to work. They want to be productive and creative and add something, to the world. And so we don't know what's going to happen in the next 6 months, but I know that for a lot of people, they will be very happy to say goodbye to unemployment and get back to work as soon as it's possible. What's good about this higher benefit amount is, what if your employer says, I can take you back now, but we're going to start out slow. Can you work part-time? Well, why not work part-time, report that income, and then you will get a partial check unemployment for that week.
So we're out of time here, but I know that the Unemployment Law Project has a weekly webinar. Can you just say some information about that so folks know there's so many questions that we didn't get to.
Yeah. Sure. Well, just a couple of things. We have a weekly webinar Monday at noon, and you can go to our website for information on that. You can also play recordings of past webinars. Also, you can call or email Ann or I at the Unemployment Law Project with questions, or just call Unemployment Law Project, and someone else who picks up the phone might answer. Or if you leave a message, leave your name, phone number, and a good time to call, and we will get back to you with individual questions. And feel free to share our email, Brian, with, it's not a secret. This is, we're public, but it may take a little while to respond, but we will respond. And if the answer is, I'm not sure yet, that shouldn't make you nervous. It should relax you, because it would be like, well, some things are not quite set yet, but don't worry about it.
Yeah, at this point, I feel like the big takeaway for me from this conversation is that so much is uncertain still, and there's more information to come, and we just have to wait until that's available, and to know that you two are both available to answer these questions. And it's unemploymentlawproject.com or .org. Unemploymentlawproject.org.
No. Yes. Is that right, John? Our emails are different. If you want to reach us by email, try info@ulproject.org. If you're looking for our website, it's unemploymentlawproject.org.
Thank you, Ann.
Or just do a Google search Unemployment Law Project, and it'll come up. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you both for your time and for answering all these questions. Really appreciate it. And thank you all out there for tuning in. Sorry for the late start and the technical difficulty, but we will figure it out for next time. And if you have, if you're looking for resources as an artist, our address is artisttrust.org. We have plenty of resources available, and also a relief fund that we're running. And then if you have questions for us, feel free to be in touch by email. So thank you all.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you. Thank you.